My son took every dollar in my savings account while I was recovering from hip surgery, then flew his wife to Cancun for 10 days. When he walked back into my house, expecting dinner on the table, he opened the basement door instead. And what he found down there made him sit on the floor and not say a word for 3 full minutes. I'd found what he hid in my truck's glove compartment 2 weeks earlier. A notarized document I was never supposed to see. If you think the basement was the shock, wait until I tell you about that document. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a mail carrier for the USPS in Decatur, Illinois. Flat feet, bad knees, a lower back that predicts rain better than any meteorologist alive. I retired at 63 with a federal pension, a small savings account I'd been adding to since 1987, and a house on Brentwood Lane that my wife Pauline and I bought the year our son was born. Pauline passed 4 years ago this March. Ovarian cancer. She was the kind of woman who ironed the dish towels and remembered every birthday in the extended family going back 2 generations. The house felt enormous after she was gone. My son's name is Jason. He's 41. His wife is Brittany. They live 20 minutes away in a newer development with a homeowners association and a community pool they use twice a year. Jason works in sales, something with industrial equipment, though I couldn't tell you the specifics because the details change depending on who's asking. Brittany does something with social media for a local boutique. They don't have children. They have a very expensive dog. I'd broken my hip in early September. Tripped over the garden hose I'd left coiled on the back porch steps. The kind of stupid accident that only sounds funny until you're lying face down on the concrete at 6 in the morning, waiting to see if you can move your legs. I could. But the hip was broken clean through. Surgery the next morning, 3 nights in the hospital, then 6 weeks of recovery at home with a walker and a bottle of ibuprofen that I rationed like it was wartime. Jason came to the hospital. He brought flowers, the kind in a cellophane sleeve from a gas station, though I didn't say that. He sat with me for 40 minutes, answered 2 phone calls, and told me not to worry about anything. I remember feeling grateful. I remember thinking he'd grown up into a decent man. I remember a lot of things I was wrong about. The week after I got home, Jason stopped by with groceries. Nothing fancy. Bread, soup, some frozen dinners. But he brought them, and he carried them inside, and he stayed long enough to help me get situated on the couch. The following Tuesday, he came again. This time he had a question. "Dad, I need to ask you something." He sat down across from me, forearms on his knees, the way he used to sit as a teenager when he was about to ask for something he knew I might say no to. "Brittany and I have been talking. I know your savings account has been sitting there. With the medical bills coming, I know you're worried. I just want to make sure we're protected, legally, in case something happens." I told him nothing was going to happen. He smiled. He said, "I know, Dad, but just as a precaution. It's what responsible families do." He had papers with him. Durable power of attorney, he explained. Just financial. Just so he could help manage things if I couldn't get around. Temporary. He kept saying temporary. I was on pain medication. I was 68 years old and living alone, and my hip hurt when I breathed too deeply. I signed. 3 days later, my savings account had a different balance. I didn't notice for almost a week because I wasn't paying bills. I wasn't doing anything except sleeping and watching the Weather Channel and eating soup. It was my neighbor Hector who mentioned it, in the way neighbors sometimes do, sideways, gentle, not wanting to cause alarm. He'd seen Jason and Brittany loading luggage into their Tahoe, the big suitcases, the ones people take on long trips. Hector had a brother-in-law in Cancun and recognized the luggage tags. I checked my account online. $22,400, gone. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and the walker parked beside me, and I looked at that number for a long time. I thought about the years it had taken to build that account, the Christmas bonuses I never touched, the overtime shifts before Pauline got sick when I worked Saturdays to give us a cushion. The life insurance payout that I'd put half of in savings because spending it felt wrong, felt like erasing her. $22,000. Jason had withdrawn it in 2 transfers, 3 days apart, both from an ATM in the town center. I closed the laptop. I sat very still. Then I thought about what he'd said. In case something happens. Protected, responsible families. And I thought about his truck, which was in my driveway right now, because he'd borrowed it the week before to haul something for a friend and had left it while they took Brittany's car to the airport. He'd left the keys on my kitchen counter. I shouldn't have looked, I know that. But I was sitting in my house with a broken hip and no savings and a very quiet feeling in my chest that I needed to understand, and the truck was right there. I used the walker to get down the front steps. It took 4 minutes. I drove my neighbor Hector's spare cane into the ground and rested twice. I got to the truck and opened the passenger door and sat sideways on the seat because I couldn't fully climb in, and I reached across to the glove compartment and opened it. There was a manila envelope. My name was on the front. Raymond Mercer, it said, and then I realized no, not Raymond, my name in Jason's handwriting. The return address was a law office in Springfield. I took the envelope inside. I sat at the table. I opened it. The first document was a property assessment for the house on Brentwood Lane. Current market value, $187,000. The second was a document I had to read 3 times to understand, and then once more after that. It was a draft, not yet filed, for a guardianship petition. The grounds listed were cognitive decline, inability to manage finances, failure to maintain safe living conditions. There was a section in handwriting, Jason's. I recognized the way he made his 7s, that read, schedule neurological eval W. Dr. Kaplan before filing. Get second signature from Brittany for corroboration. The third document was a printed email, Jason to someone named T. Aldridge at the Springfield Law Office, dated 12 days ago, 2 weeks before the trip. Dad seems compliant. The surgery was good timing, honestly. People expect confusion after anesthesia. I'll get the POA signed this week and pull the funds before we leave. The house should be straightforward once guardianship goes through. He's alone, no one really checking in on him. I put the documents on the table in a row. I looked at them for a long time. He's alone, no one really checking in on him. I thought about what Pauline would say. She wouldn't say anything at first. She'd make coffee and bring it to me and sit across the table and wait until I'd work through it myself. That's what she always did. She knew I needed to arrive at things on my own. She's been gone 4 years, and I can still feel the exact weight of her presence across a kitchen table. I picked up the phone and called my sister Verna in Champaign. I told her everything. She didn't say I told you so. She said, what do you need? I said I needed a lawyer and I needed time. She said she'd call her son-in-law, who knew someone. She said she'd come on Saturday. Then I sat in my house with my walker and my broken hip and the manila envelope, and I started thinking. Jason would be back in 10 days. I had 10 days. The lawyer Verna's son-in-law found was a woman named Patricia Howell, family law, based in Springfield. She came to the house the following Monday because I couldn't drive yet. She sat at my kitchen table and went through the documents without any visible surprise, which told me she'd seen worse. When she finished, she looked at me over her glasses. The power of attorney can be revoked immediately. I'll have the revocation drawn up today. The guardianship petition hasn't been filed, so there's nothing to fight yet. But we need to document your competence now proactively, before he can establish any narrative. Can you get a cognitive evaluation this week? I can try. She paused. The withdrawal, he technically had legal authority under the POA at the time of transfer. That's the complicated part. We may not be able to recover the money through simple demand. But fraud is fraud if we can show the POA was obtained under false pretenses. I thought about the word compliant in that email. I thought about surgery was good timing, honestly. Set up everything you can, I said. Document everything. I want a record of exactly who I am and how clearly I'm thinking right now. She nodded. One more thing. When he comes back, and I strongly advise you not to confront him alone. I won't be alone, I said. I wasn't entirely sure yet how I was going to arrange that, but I was already thinking. The cognitive evaluation was Tuesday morning. Dr. Miriam Vasquez at St. Mary's Outpatient Clinic, referred by my regular physician. She was thorough, patient, and utterly unimpressed by the idea that I might be impaired. I scored in the normal range on every assessment. She wrote a full report, stamped and signed, and gave me 2 copies. I paid for it out of what was left in my checking account. About $400. I rationed it carefully. On Wednesday, I called the local USPS Retirees Association. I'd been a member for years but hadn't attended meetings since Pauline died. The chapter president was a man named Douglas Park, who remembered me, who asked about my hip, and who went very quiet when I explained the situation. He said, "You need to tell me what you need." I told him. He didn't hesitate. On Thursday, my sister Verna arrived from Champaign with her car, and a casserole and a look on her face that I recognized from childhood. The look she got when someone had done something that required a reckoning. She walked through the house, set the casserole on the counter, and said, "Where are his spare keys?" "Right here," I said, holding them up. "Good, we're changing the locks this afternoon." We changed the locks. We had copies made for Verna, for Hector next door, and for Patricia Howell. I kept 3 sets for myself. Jason had no key to this house anymore, though he didn't know that yet. On Saturday, I called Patricia Howell. She'd drafted a formal demand letter for the return of the funds. She'd also made a report to the Illinois Department on Aging, Elder Financial Abuse Division. She explained that this created a paper trail whether or not we pursued it further. I told her to file everything she thought was appropriate. Sunday was quiet. I sat on the back porch with Verna and drank coffee and watched the birds at the feeder Pauline had hung from the maple tree the spring before she died. I still feel it every week. I don't know why exactly. It just seems important to keep doing. I thought about the basement. The basement of the house on Brentwood Lane was where I kept my woodworking equipment. Nothing as elaborate as a real workshop, a workbench, a decent table saw, a router, some hand tools I'd accumulated over 30 years. I'd made furniture down there. A bookcase for Jason's room when he was 12. A toy chest that was now in his garage, holding Christmas decorations. I hadn't been down there in months, between the weather and Pauline's illness and then my own recovery. But I knew what was down there. I also knew what wasn't down there anymore. The 67 Chevelle that I'd been restoring for 6 years, 2-door, Fathom Green, the project I'd been planning to finish and sell. It had been in the garage. I'd told Jason about it many times. He knew its value. 2 months before my surgery, he'd asked if he could store it at his place while some work was done on my garage. I'd said yes. I hadn't asked for it back since the surgery. I called Douglas Park again. I explained the Chevelle situation. He knew a man, he always knew someone, a classic car appraiser and restorer named Walter Gibbs, who operated out of a shop in Forsyth. Douglas said he'd ask Walter to call me. Walter called Monday morning, I explained the car. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "Mid-restoration 67 Chevelle, correct body, good documentation. You're looking at market in the 40 to 60 range depending on completion." I asked if he did house calls and pickup. He said he could do both. I said I needed to move carefully on this. I explained enough for him to understand the situation. He said, "My mother went through something similar. Take the time you need." On Tuesday, I called Patricia again. I told her about the Chevelle. She said the car was mine, titled in my name, stored at Jason's property without a storage agreement. She could send a letter demanding its return. I said I preferred to handle it directly. She said she understood but wanted the revocation of POA filed first. It was filed that afternoon. I spent Wednesday going through papers at the kitchen table. The title to the Chevelle. Maintenance records going back to 2018. Documentation of parts purchased. Original purchase receipt for the car. Pauline had teased me about the Chevelle. She'd called it my second wife. I told her she had nothing to worry about. The Chevelle didn't talk back. She'd laughed until she cried. On Thursday, Verna drove me to Jason's house while he was at work. I had the car title. I rang the bell. Brittany answered in exercise clothes, phone in hand. She looked at me, at the walker, at Verna behind me, and her face did something complicated. "I'm here for the Chevelle," I said. She started to say something about Jason needing to. I held up the title. "It's my car," I said. "It's titled in my name. I'd like it back today. If you'd prefer, my lawyer can arrange that conversation instead." She gave us the garage door code. Walter Gibbs arrived 40 minutes later with a trailer. He walked around the Chevelle slowly, crouched to check the undercarriage, looked at the documentation I'd brought. He gave me a number, 53,000, based on current condition and the restoration work completed. He wrote a check on the spot, had his own notary on call, and filed the proper transfer paperwork before he left. I sat in Verna's passenger seat with a check for $53,000 and looked at the garage where the Chevelle had been, now empty, and I didn't feel anything for a moment. Then I felt something that wasn't quite sadness and wasn't quite relief. It was more like when you finally pull a splinter out, the kind that's been in so long you'd almost gotten used to it. Verna squeezed my shoulder and didn't say anything. That's what I love about my sister. She always knows when not to speak. I deposited the check the next day. I opened a new account at a different bank, in my name only, with Verna as the sole emergency contact. I left nothing in the old account. I also called Social Security to ensure my monthly deposit was redirected to the new account. Patricia Howell notified me that the POA revocation was on record and that Jason had likely been informed by this point, since the Springfield law firm would have received her correspondence. Jason did not call me. He texted, "Dad, we need to talk when we're back." That was all. I did not reply. I spent the next 3 days getting the house ready, not redecorating, just clarifying. I had Hector help me move a few things from the garage into the basement and rearrange the workshop space. I sorted through what was down there. I made it look intentional because it was. When Jason's flight landed, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the manila envelope and a folder Patricia Howell had sent over. Every document, every notarized record, the cognitive evaluation, the demand letter, the elder abuse report, the Chevelle sale paperwork. All of it organized in a red folder that had been Pauline's, the one she used for tax records. I'd unlocked the front door, that was all. The Tahoe pulled into the driveway at noon. I heard the doors, heard the luggage, heard Brittany say something about being exhausted. Jason's key didn't work. There was a pause, then a knock. I said, "It's open." He came in looking tanned and slightly confused. Brittany behind him. The house looked the same from the front hallway. Furniture where it had been, everything in order. Jason looked around briefly, relaxed. "Hey, Dad. Trip was great. You doing okay? We brought you back something a little." He trailed off. He'd noticed the table. He'd noticed me sitting very still with my hands folded on the red folder. "You look good," he said more carefully. "I do," I said. "Sit down, Jason." He sat. Brittany stayed standing near the door, which I found interesting. "I know you want to talk," he said. "The account stuff I can explain. We just needed a temporary." I held up one hand. "Before you say anything else," I said, "I want to show you something." I pushed the red folder across the table. His eyes went to it, then to my face, then back to the folder. "What's that?" "Open it." He opened it slowly. The top document was the printed email. "My father seems compliant. Surgery was good timing, honestly." I watched his face. He'd been tan a moment ago. The color went somewhere. "That's," he started. "Below it is the draft guardianship petition," I said, "with your handwriting in the margins. Below that is the cognitive evaluation I completed last Tuesday. Below that is the revocation of power of attorney, filed and recorded 10 days ago." Below that is the Elder Financial Abuse Report, filed with the Illinois Department on Aging. Below that is the sale documentation for the Chevelle. At the word Chevelle, he looked up. "You sold the $53,000, I said. "It was my car. I have the title and the bill of sale." Brittany said something from the doorway quietly, and Jason shook his head at her without looking. The back door opened. Verna came in from the kitchen because she'd been there since 11. Behind her was Douglas Park, silver-haired, postal retiree's jacket, and a woman I introduced as Patricia Howell. "Who are these people?" Jason said. "Witnesses," I said, "and my attorney." Patricia set her own folder on the table. "Mr. Mercer," she said to Jason, "I want to be very clear about what we're documenting today. Every financial transaction conducted under the power of attorney has been reviewed. The withdrawal of $22,400 occurred after the POA was signed, under circumstances we consider coercive. The email I've provided to the Illinois Department on Aging uses the phrase surgery was good timing. We'll be discussing that language at length in any proceedings." Jason looked at me. His face had done several things in the past 2 minutes. Calculation, softness, a brief attempt at something that wanted to be contrition. None of them landed. "Dad." His voice went quiet, the register he'd used as a child when he was genuinely frightened of consequences. "I didn't mean look, I made some bad decisions. I was stressed. The money was supposed to be a loan. I was going to pay it back." "When?" Verna said from across the room. She said it pleasantly, the way she's always said uncomfortable things. He didn't answer. "I'm going to need you to return what you withdrew," I said. "Patricia will provide the account information. I'm not going to pursue the other filings, provided that happens promptly and completely. If it doesn't, we proceed with everything that's already been filed." Brittany said, "This is insane," and Jason said her name sharply and she stopped. "You can't just," he started. "I'm 68 years old," I said. "I had hip surgery 6 weeks ago. I scored in the superior range on the cognitive evaluation. Dr. Vasquez's word, not mine. I revoked the power of attorney 10 days ago. I sold my own vehicle, which you were storing without a written agreement. And I have witnesses to this conversation." He looked at Patricia. She looked back at him with the expression of someone who has been doing this for 25 years and cannot be surprised. "Jason," she said, "the documentation we have assembled would make any counterclaim extremely difficult to sustain. I would encourage you to speak with your own attorney before deciding on a course of action, but I would also encourage you to move quickly. The elder abuse report creates a timeline. He left an hour later. Brittany didn't look at me on the way out. Verna made more coffee. Douglas Park stayed for a while, and we talked about things that had nothing to do with any of this. A guy we'd both known at the Central Post Office who'd retired to Florida and taken up kayaking, the new route changes downtown. It was good to talk about nothing. It's something people forget, that ordinary conversation is its own kind of shelter. The money came back in 2 transfers over the following 9 days. Patricia confirmed each one and documented them. No message from Jason, no call. I didn't reach out either. 3 weeks after that, my neighbor Hector told me he'd seen a for sale sign go up at Jason and Brittany's house. He asked if I knew. I said I'd heard something. He nodded and didn't press, which is why I like Hector. I don't know where they went. I heard Texas from someone. It doesn't matter much. What I know is this. The day after the money came back, I drove myself, hip still not perfect, but passable, to the lumberyard 2 towns over. I bought oak and maple and a set of carving chisels I'd been considering for 2 years. I came home and went down to the basement workshop and stood at the workbench and ran my hand over the surface. The same workbench I'd built in 1996. The same smell of sawdust and linseed oil that's been there since before Jason was old enough to come down and watch me work. I'm building a bookcase. Nothing special. 3 shelves, clean lines, dovetail joints. The kind of thing I used to make in a weekend. It's taking me longer now, between the hip and the fact that I stop sometimes and just look at what I'm doing for a while. Not because I've forgotten, because I want to remember. Pauline used to say that I put more of myself into the things I built than into any conversation I ever had. She meant it as a gentle criticism. I've been thinking lately that she was right, and that maybe there's nothing wrong with that, with leaving pieces of yourself in objects that outlast you. The bookcase will be in my living room. My name is on this house. I'm staying in it. Some nights I sit on the back porch and fill the bird feeder and watch the maple tree lose its leaves in the October wind, and I think about how close I came. How close I came to ending up somewhere with fluorescent lights and a roommate and a weekly pill organizer someone else controls. How close a signed piece of paper and a bottle of pain medication and a son who thought I wasn't paying attention almost got me there. I was paying attention. I'm still paying attention. There are other parents in houses like mine right now, alone, recovering from something, trusting someone they raised, because what else do you do? If you're one of them, and I think some of you know exactly what I mean, don't sign anything you don't fully understand. Don't let convenience become compliance. And don't let anyone tell you that your age makes your judgment less than what it is. I'm 68. I built this house's bookshelves and raised a child in these rooms and buried the woman I loved in the ground 3 miles from here, and I am paying attention to every single thing that happens in my life. The bird feeder needs filling. I'll do it in the morning.